If you've been following along, we've been talking about an idea called the Refinery Paradox. Today, as a request from multiple different platforms here in the middle of the night, basically for me, it's 3 a.m. East Coast Standard Time, but I'm here recording. I'm trying to drop this before the weekend so I can go enjoy spring break with my kids. But what we're going to talk about is the next 5 to 10 years and what it looks like in the economy globally, in the market globally, and just kind of what you need to be doing for your job, right? What do you need to be doing for your employment? How do you need to find the next job? And depending on where you are in your career, between those who are straight out of college, those who have a couple of years of experience, those who are mid career, those who are considered tenured or senior, and how do you need to plan, right? If you're also maybe even on the verge of retirement, how do you need to plan? What does the next 5 to 10 years look like for the economy and your job with artificial intelligence as it relates to my theorem in what we call the refinery paradox? If you haven't already checked out the Substack or me on TikTok, please go to the description, check out the links to the videos here that you can also find. The refinery paradox explanations for part one and part two are on the YouTube channel so far. And I have articles written about those for more in-depth perspectives and sources on Substack if you haven't already checked that out as well. And I'm just now joining LinkedIn again. I took a little bit of a hiatus, so if you're watching me on LinkedIn, please be sure to check out those platforms. So we're going to jump into what exactly do we see happening over the next 5 to 10 years for the economy as part of the refinery paradox, not sort of, but specifically an answer for subject matter experts and everybody in the field as it relates to artificial intelligence and the economy. The difference here for me, and I'm sorry as I'm battling a sneeze, the difference here is that I have a level of experience in the field as a practitioner myself. So I do have an engineering background, strategy background, finance background, healthcare, manufacturing, and I'm going to use all of the things that I work now as a senior strategist with businesses in my consultancy. And I'm going to speak to you about how you need to deal with this. Okay. How you need to prepare yourself again for the next 5 to 10 years, what it actually looks like, not in relation to the theories from other influencers and how they see it, but how the refinery paradox explains it. So again, please go check out part one, part two of those videos so you can get an understanding, of kind of where we're coming from. Okay, so to kind of jump into it, it's pretty clear the economy is changing dramatically. If you're not aware of some of these data points I'm about to share, then please don't feel like you're missing anything. This stuff is literally on the edge of information, and I'm giving you an insight perspective as I'm working as a strategist to manage this risk with businesses across the spectrum. So what you're looking at here is a graphic to try to demonstrate what exactly is happening with the economy as relates to knowledge work specifically. So the refinery paradox, again, from part one and part two, if you haven't checked it out, addresses what happens with the quote unquote infrastructure layer and that refinery or refining layer. And then what we also address very lightly is that discovery layer. But the theorem is simple. It really says that codifiable knowledge will contract, right? I mean, that part you're probably seeing in your career already. The experience premium, as it's labeled from the theorem, is going to become essential. That's how jobs survive. And infrastructure adjacent jobs will become valuable as well, right? So the refining layer will capture most of that value. We talked about who belongs in that: Google, Nvidia, not Anthropic, sorry, but Google, Nvidia, AWS. Think people who own the infrastructure, people who are at the very tip top of the game. And then you have people who are adjacent to that. So kind of in the oil paradox that we talked about previously, there are businesses that do well because there are oil executives, oil businesses in town, oil teams who kind of go in and work the crew every day. I mean, I'm sure many of you watch Landman, the show. I also watch it. But if you just take that context and when those crews are going to like the dining hall, getting something to eat, those eateries do well, right? Because they have tons of people coming in. There's a schedule. They know how much, people are going to pay, and they know obviously those guys are getting paid well as oil rig work people. And so what you'll see is that there is going to be an absorption of what we call the discovery layer, right? So that codifiable research side, pretty much every job that belongs to the discovery layer is going to get absorbed. And so every career decision that we're going to address here should be made against the theorem's outcome. And a lot of this, as I said, is really just based on how I've been able to see this, be a part of it, address it with people who work as interns for myself or junior engineers I've trained in the last couple of years here. Okay. So for parents who are trying to make decisions right now, let's address that. So for parents who are trying to get into what you do with your kids for the next couple of years, this has been a category a lot of people have called me about or sent DMs. I've had great conversations, but I am not completely outside of the results or the consequences of this. I have I have two kids, but I have one who is 10, 11 years old. And I am always thinking about what exactly is going to be the outcome for her career and how can she have an impact. And as a software developer, a computer engineer, she wanted to follow in my footsteps early when she had access to understanding what I was doing. And a lot of that has just changed, right? So what we're now addressing is something almost all of us are going to go through together, is what I would say. One second, let me take a drink. Okay, so let's kind of talk about, if you have kids under 18, I truly believe that the window to shape your kids' future is completely open, right? The careers that pay well today are not going to be the careers that pay well in 2030, 2035. And I'm going to give you the data specifically on how we know that, right? So when it comes to my critique of what people are going after as parents is that many of us go after the best salary that we can. We are kind of saying that we want our kids to be able to do well. That's clear. And so it was always knowledge-based jobs that had the top of the food chain, pretty much since the beginning of human history. And so the place that we are at now is for knowledge-based jobs. How is that going to attack? So on the screen now, I'm presenting some data about how junior engineering is the first codifiable job that is going to be automated. And what that means is you've already seen the data on TV very lightly, but in 2025, we actually do have solid information about how that is affecting people between 20 and 25 years old. And what is happening here is that there's a 13% decline in employment because computer science is not safe alone as a degree to go into. You already see huge tech companies who are cutting their workforces. And yes, a lot of that is due to overstaffing from the pandemic or just bad management. But in relation to how the business was running, you should really ask yourself, would they still be employed at that same level today if artificial intelligence was not present? And I think from the evidence we have about how useful and how advanced these models are becoming, how quickly they're becoming, the evidence says, yes, they would still certainly be employed in this situation right now. There would maybe be some shrinking of this market, but we would not see people like Jack Dorsey cutting, 4,000 people at a time, Oracle cutting people across the globe. Yesterday, from today, I believe I saw Atlassian was announcing they were cutting 10% of their workforce globally. So you would not be seeing the uncomfortable truth of junior employment being affected if it was not something that was, accurate. So the safe bet, as I've kind of said here, is not at the intersection of just computer science and being president at a software company anymore. It's at the intersection of technical knowledge and understanding institutional context and understanding physical systems knowledge, and then passing that with experience into human judgment, right? So any of that type of stuff is going to be regulated. It's going to be in markets that require regulation. A- And that will give you context on how to move forward for sure. So on the screen here, I'm going to present now where to point your kids specifically in my data that I've gathered here. So engineering and electrical engineering, or energy and electrical engineering, right? Every data center needs power. That's just clear. $690 billion of infrastructure that we talked about from part one and part two, from the refiners or the people who own the infrastructure in general. Those people have dedicated $690 billion in infrastructure. And so that means they're going to lead the economy. They're going to lead how jobs are formed for the 20-year demand cycle that is in front of electrical engineering, right? So trades with technical overlay, things like, more electricians than software engineers on site, is just going to be true. Those things cannot be offshored, right? You cannot automate an electrician. And then, of course, those are regulated because they have licenses for electricians. Healthcare with informatics, I would say healthcare is the slowest enterprise sector to adopt AI right now. The build out for that is complicated because of regulation, privacy laws, but then also adoption for the complexity in the infrastructure of actually putting together what AI needs to run on, right? The AI infrastructure, the architecture, that stuff is incredibly difficult to get to the level that you can use a highly effective model without wasting a ton of money to get a very simple answer. And so clinical informatics and health data, I would say, are, a long projected health field that will work. Even if you hear people from Silicon Valley or different influencers who put out information and say, I think these will be accomplishable and things like that, I'm just going to keep it real with you. Those things are not going to happen. Healthcare it's not going to be something you can throw a model at and just get an answer. The first problem is the cost, right? When you talk about just throwing a model at something to get an answer, it's incredibly expensive from a token perspective. And unless I've missed something recently, the foundational models, the API driven ones, are still the best ones. So you're going to want to kind of stick on those. Environmental and sustainability science are going to be the hyperscalers as well. So this field barely exists at scale today and will be mandatory within the next, I'd say, 5 years for sure. That comes with environmental lawyers, environmental and sustainability teams, people who kind of have to work around things that we know are important to just save our planet, but obviously things that will become more important to sustain AI and the heavy workloads of data centers in general, right? So, what to avoid, I would say, just straight up, is I would avoid pure computer science, right? I would avoid general business degrees. I would avoid AI augmented entry skills. So, things like data analysis, content creation, honestly, routine financial modeling. AI really can just copy what you're doing there and it's going to just do it, right? So I would say for your kids, my kids specifically, specific degrees matter less than the ability to separate what they would say is ambiguous or unclear. It's also important for you to build institutional context and to learn how to work between those physical and digital systems. So the next 5 years of their career matter enormously, I would say. And then roles that require explicit tacit knowledge will compound and not depreciate, right? So just heads up here about what I would say to avoid. And then for recent college grads and early career folks, let's get into kind of what you should be experiencing or expecting coming up here, right? This is probably my biggest group on TikTok who ask a ton of great questions. I am always really sad that I can't answer all of the DMs or the questions that I get or the calls. So if you have not already liked and shared this video, please go ahead and do that. Leave a comment below. Let me know, where are you in your career? Also go to the description of my bio or the link of the bio or the bio description below on the video. Let me know if you're subscribed to the Substack, subscribe to any other channels, because I'm going to start dropping kind of content specific stuff on each platform and drive home these messages, because I think there's a lot of doomsday stuff that can really take away from what everybody can expect for their careers. And it is certainly not all doomsday. That's what I would say. So for my recent college grads and early career folks, ages 22 to 28, if you are listening now, this is for you. You are the most vulnerable cohort that I'm going to speak to here, right? You are the ones who are facing the 13% employment decline recently, and what has been considered the traditional path is breaking, right? So if you're Gen Z, younger Gen Z, this is for you. And I want to speak about how this is not because of something you've done. This is not because of how humans have valued your generation. This is how overall capitalism works. And of course, there are ups and downs to that, but we're not here to talk about how that's gonna be the worst and you should just give up. We are here to talk about how to prepare for the future and what you can do to prepare. Right. So jumping straight into this, let's talk about the brutal reality, right? The old path that we just said used to be get a degree, get an entry level job, learn on the job, become a mid level person. This is essentially what I did, right? This is the logic that most people were hiring and needed juniors for. What we're seeing is that AI can handle a lot of the tasks that you would learn in that first phase and for a lot less, of course. Excuse me, I'm taking a drink. Okay. Distributed accountability, I would say, is something that is underplayed in everyone else's theorems that I've talked about. If you've not checked out the video yet, part 1 or part 2, go check out the Refinery Paradox. I'll be dropping part 3 on Sunday coming up. And so if you're not subscribed to the YouTube and notifications turned on, please go ahead and do that so you can stay locked in and make sure you get those details. As when it comes to distributed accountability, this is something I've described in those videos. So if you're not familiar, just go back and kind of listen to that. But nobody in the organizations that we're talking about from businesses has decided to stop hiring junior positions. That's not how this is working. What is really occurring behind the scenes, it just happens through attrition. People are retiring, quitting, going to other companies, whatever. And then there are what are called efficiency gains. So every time something like that happens is an opportunity for a business to figure out if they can do something better. And then what will happen is a pilot program or something is built by a mid-level or senior team, and a task that has been monumentally difficult or just taking up a lot of time that a junior would have normally assumed with salary and benefits is just no longer placed out there for them to do. And so task by task, quietly, those things kind of get automated away. What I would say is the pipeline is collapsing, obviously. So firms are hiring fewer juniors because this model sees AI handling what juniors used to do and learn from. So that on ramp to the mid level expertise that I've kind of talked about has been disappearing. So I'm going to keep this pretty simple, right? What should you be doing if you're in this age group for the next 1 to 2 years, your 12 to 24 month action plan? If you are in ages 22 to 28, I say this is what you need to do from now until you are fully employed and in a job that you think can pay your bills and then give you the lifestyle that you can start deciding what else you want to do with your life. I would say you need to get into infra-adjacent projects, right? These can start with AWS, Azure, GCP certifications. There are plenty of them out there. I will start listing some of these in videos coming up. We'll do some actual evident, like go over detailed ones that you should start working on. But I think you need to be talking about how to pursue cloud-based certifications. And then you want to move into focusing on staying in regulated industries that will heavily benefit from this. So healthcare, finance, government. I would say you want to talk about joining on vendor side projects. You can build vendor projects at the companies you'll join, or even join the vendors who will sell most of these things. And you'll want to aim for being a part of products and deployments and things they're putting out there that will touch customers' lives. And I would say avoid hype roles. Okay. I know there's a lot of things on TikTok, YouTube, other places that say prompt engineering, context engineering, all these different fancy ways that larger subject matter experts are just making content to really get you involved. But I would say avoid those roles, right? Anything that's not considered shippable or usable, just stay away from them, right? The goal is not to be uncertified. I would say it's positioning yourself inside the ecosystem where you can really be a part of the value. And there's institutional context that can only be gained by being a part of these teams. That's the moat, right? That's the way you keep AI from taking your job or your importance. You become the person who drives it at the company, right? Okay. So from here, I guess I say specifically if your daily work is summarizing documents, writing first drafts, running standard analysis, managing routine applications or communications, I believe you're on the wrong side of the automation line, right? I think you need to learn what you can, get out now, and do so before there's a reorganization that changes what you are part of, right? That's moving away, that's moving towards roles where you accumulate that context. That could look like an analyst role or projects that are being volunteered at the company that you don't know necessarily fit what you're doing or what you're interested in doing, or that can look like, again, going to build on vendor specific applications at the company, SQL, access products, older products that need to be learned from the tech perspective could be very helpful. If you're in marketing, advertising, different roles like that, ask the question of, what is a pain? What is a problem to manage? Find things that are a pain to manage and become the person who solves them. You can solve them with AI, but be the person who gets the credit for that in your particular role. Okay. Next, we're going to talk to my group, the folks who are in for experienced early to mid career people. Okay. If you're between the ages of 28 to 40, this is for you. This part is for you. And just specifically, you are in the strongest position, right? For my experience, early to mid career workers from the age of 28, 24, you are in a narrowing window, I would say, where there is an experience premium that is talked about again in the Refinery Paradox. So please go check that out. The videos are going to be in the description for the actual getting to that to understand and read that or listen as well. So go to the Substack, read my bio, and get to the links for the other platforms so you can digest this information and have a chance to hear it all. Excuse me, I'm still battling sneezes, allergies here in the Southeast US. So let's talk about what this means as relation to my mid-career folks, right? Are you a tool or a strategist? Okay, I'm not trying to be rude. I'm not trying to be rude when I say this. Applying your skills at your organization can kind of be seen as two different levels as a mid-career. All right. You're either one of the best operational people to handle your work at this point, hands-on, or you're moving into the strategist role where you're starting to optimize cycles and be part of project management and looking at advisement layers, that sort of stuff. Either role is totally fine, but what you need to understand is where do you fall on this line? Okay. The credentials that will start to position you going forward. These are governance terms, these are certifications that you need to start becoming familiar with. There is the AI governance certification, data management leadership. There's clearly certification for security stuff, expertise stuff that you can go for security. Those just strengthen your background if you already understand them, but they can be very useful in the next stage of the economy that's going to evolve from here. So, in terms of your FedRAMP work, if you're a federal government employee, make sure you think about picking up a certification from there or contracting. Then you have the CMMC compliance standards that are now becoming the industry expectations as regulatory bodies start to pick up how to deal with this stuff. You're going to want to make sure that you stay on the forefront too. You're going to want to make sure that you understand what's going on too. So as a mid-career person, make sure that you kind of stay in front of these situations. Let's talk about how to build your practitioner's moat if you're in that mid-career situation, right? You need to be building what I would say is your public knowledge position A lot of the stuff that I'm doing here with you is me doing that myself, right? So I'm trying to be a practitioner myself of the stuff I'm advising on. What does that mean? You need to think about considering writing, speaking, publishing your analyses. I don't think you need to talk about aiming for a massive audience. You just need to be willing to be a subject matter expert, so that decision makers can get to know your name and understand both sides of the technology that you might stand on. I would say think about going fractional or consulting at this point, or consider setting yourself up for it. Firms are always willing to buy expertise over building that, right? Because of the expense. And so fractional architecture roles and advisory retainer roles are going to be a part of that as well. And yes, I do offer, if you're interested and you would like to learn more about what I can certainly help on as a project from a fractional perspective, or just have those open conversations, go to the link in my bio. Feel free to email, go to the website, thedataexperts.us, and more than willing to learn more about your project and see if there is a partnership there. Please like and subscribe to the video, comment, let me know if you have any interest in that as well. I know this is a pretty long one, and would love to hear about where you're watching from, or what you think of the content so far. So again, I would say for my mid careers and folks who are listening, building your moat, avoid complacency, right? There's a 40% projected cancellation for agentic AI projects by 2027 alone. That means that there are firms that are falling behind the AI adoption simply, right? But that means there's a huge opportunity. So don't be on the team that is going to take that fallback, is what I would say. For my senior leadership professionals, folks who are 45, 50, 40 to 55 plus, okay, if you're in part of the enclave class or the extracted class, either, we can have a chance to try to address that. So if you don't know what I'm referring to about the enclave class or the extracted class, again, please go to watch part one, part two of the Refinery Paradox. This is a pretty long video itself, and I want you to get full context, kind of like what that means. So go check that out. Try to get an understanding. Do you feel like you fall in the enclave or the extracted class? But here is the presentation over folks who fall in the senior professional and leadership roles. So if you're either enclave or you're about to be early retirement, I think there's very little middle ground. Institutional knowledge and pattern recognition are the most valuable assets right now, and you can be in a position to take great advantage of that. I think AI, as I've phrased it with the refinery paradox, is an accelerant. It's not a paradigm shift. It produces two profit and loss outputs, right? There's organizational capacity that will be the bottleneck, and governance is theoretical until it is tested under pressure, which we get to see right now because of the global conflict in real time. There's going to be a hoarding of access to these different governance abilities and these technologies. And so you should ask, where can you become an owner in that layer? So I would say there's three strategies for you in this layer that you should be looking at building a board and advisory position in the next 5 years. Between AI governance, data ethics, enterprise risk oversight, these roles will pay super well. There'll be leverage for your accumulated experience, and the one layer that AI adoption creates demand for rather than reducing. Consider ESOPs from folks who have mentioned this in other theories as economic theories in general. There's one like the 1042 rollover. This is like a shared equity situation where you would gain distributed ownership without requiring systemic change. And so significant tax advantages with that one, but other ones have different levels of let's say, investment and payout. Third, I would say invest in human capital. It's self-interest, right? There's the extracted class. Their purchasing power will be eroded by these changes. And so eventually it will be hollowed out for that demand, which means it could affect your outcome for your business. So you would need to position yourself to extract the value or the money from the enclave economy. So mentorship, community capital, and policy advocacy are not charity, right? They're long-term economic self-interest, and you should be working to validate that for your career. Here are 5 things that I think the theorem says that everybody should understand, regardless of your age, your industry, or your role. These are 5 realities that are already active in the economy. Understanding them is not optional. I think these are a minimum requirement for an informed decision. Okay, so the 5 truths. AI moves in slow compression, not dramatic moments. We've talked about the codifiable work, but in general, by the time you notice something is happening here in artificial intelligence, it's going to be far too late for you to make some significant change in your industry. So you should be worried about your career. Number 2, the experience premium is the most valuable asset. Every year, accumulating tacit knowledge means that you're becoming more valuable in your position. This makes you harder to replace. So you should continue to invest in depth, not breadth. Okay. Number 3, infrastructure is where value concentrates. We've talked about this in the first 2 videos of the Refinery Paradox. Again, if you have not checked that out, please go check that out. Link in my bio or the description. In every technological revolution, winners will control the infrastructure, and the technology that is dependent upon will be really the situation that changes, not the technology that changed itself. So position yourself as part of that or close to that layer so that your skills will be visible. Number 4, nobody is coming to restructure the system for you. The government will not be on time to fix this for anyone. The corporations will take advantage of how the system works, but they will not be able to change it because of the distributed accountability layer that we have talked about before. And that prevents voluntary redistribution, not the market. So your positioning is your responsibility. Number 5, the future is already here, unevenly distributed. So distribution follows predictable lines through race, geography, class, and proximity to capital. Understanding those lines is not politics. In part 3 of the Refinery Paradox that I'll be dropping this weekend, make sure you like and subscribe so you can get notifications, hit that notification bell. Part 3 of that video is going to be pretty damning about why the Refinery Paradox already has more evidence that it's going to sustain than the other major theorems that are out there. So if you are interested in learning more, please make sure you stick around for that and check part 3 as it gets dropped here coming out. So your positioning, as I said, is your responsibility. We want to be honest about this. I want to be honest about this so you can take advantage, right? So for parents, you need to aim for physical digital intersections with what I've called that 20-year runway. You can find that by Googling 20-year runways for careers, though. Excuse me, I had to take a drink. Ages 22 to 28, I would say you need to start talking about how to get infrastructure adjacent in your career before there's a major reorg. Ages 28 to 40, we've talked about moving from executor to strategist in the next 5 years. And ages 40 to 55 plus, you need to figure out how you can become a part of owning the governance layer and invest in the human capital. Okay. So as we've been talking, this is directly addressing part 1, part 2 of the Refinery Paradox and why this is the most sound data-backed analysis and theorem to explain how artificial intelligence is going to affect the world. And then I wanted to make this video to address your career specifically, and especially my everyone in my cohort, 28 to 40, but folks who are younger than me. I want you to have a little bit of insight on how to deal with the future, because it is not all bleak. It is not all dark. You will have opportunities to be very successful and find money that pays very, very well. But you need to listen to reality and start making decisions based off of the data that exists, right? So if you're thinking that you can make a career out of things that used to make a lot of great money, I would just ask yourself, has that all happened over time economically and historically, or do things change? And so where we are is an opportunity for you to evaluate that. Thank you for watching the video. If you made it this far, please drop a like and subscribe, hit the notification bell so you can get up-to-date drops when that happens. Again, part 3 for The Refinery Paradox will be happening this weekend, and I can't wait to talk about that with you all. Talk soon. Have a great one.